There's something profoundly moving in the way some people perceive death, not as an end, but as a passage to something far greater and more mystical. Take Padre Pio, a man whose entire life was an unshakable spiritual devotion, like an ascent toward the divine. Just before his death, Padre Pio experienced extraordinary moments that left those around him in deep admiration. This devoted man, even weakened and gravely ill, refused to abandon his spiritual duties. In 1968, his health was visibly declining, yet his spirit remained strong, almost indomitable. He continued listening to confessions, persisting in offering the spiritual support he had provided all his life. He had this habit, almost prophetic, of asking his Capuchin brothers every evening to commend him to God, never knowing if he would see the next dawn. His approach to life and death, so deeply rooted in faith, was not tinged with fear, but with a certain serenity before the inevitable. If you enjoy these kinds of inspiring stories, consider subscribing and liking the video. It's a simple gesture, but it helps us immensely to share more extraordinary stories. A few months before his departure, Padre Pio requested that an image of Saint Joseph be placed near his cell. He visited it daily, stopping in silence for a moment of intense prayer. Later, it was understood that he was praying to Saint Joseph for a peaceful death. This prayer, filled with faith and calm, spread throughout the monastery, creating an almost mystical atmosphere. As the days passed, the entire monastery seemed wrapped in profound silence. As his last days approached, Padre Pio immersed himself even more in prayer. Each word seemed an offering of his soul to God, as if his entire being was preparing for what he called the true departure. He knew his time on earth was but a stage, a brief stop on his journey to eternity. In a letter to his friend Padre Agostino, he even expressed the fatigue of earthly life, his desire to join Jesus, and the fear of being separated from him. His final moments are a powerful reminder of the profound impact of faith and hope. The night before his death, weakened but filled with that inner strength, Padre Pio made his last confession and renewed his Franciscan vows. Firmly holding his rosary, he murmured the names of Jesus and Mary, witnessing to the faith that had never left him. Then something mysterious happened. He mentioned seeing two mothers. This was interpreted as a reference to the Virgin Mary and his own earthly mother, creating an image filled with mysticism. His stigmata, those marks that symbolized his suffering and union with Christ, began to fade, leaving his skin smooth, without any trace of those wounds. This phenomenon was seen as a sign of his passage to eternal peace. His funeral was grand, befitting the spiritual legacy he had left on so many lives. Over 100,000 people gathered to pay tribute, and helicopters dropped flowers over the grieving crowd, symbolizing the grace and blessing that his existence had brought. Even after his departure, his message continued to resonate, and many still seek his guidance and inspiration today. In the days before his death, Padre Pio celebrated a special Mass, filled with gratitude for the prayer groups around the world that had been officially recognized. This event was an accomplishment for him, an acknowledgement of his efforts to lay strong foundations for these groups. At the end of this celebration, weakened, he nearly collapsed, but his Capuchin brothers helped him remain standing. Even in his last moments, Padre Pio showed unwavering dedication. Supported by his brothers, he appeared at the monastery window to bless the faithful gathered below. This touching scene reflected the depth of his love and connection with those he called his spiritual children. On the night before his passing, weakened but strangely resolute, he made an unusual gesture. He stood up, crossed his cell to light a candle himself, and remained motionless, gazing at a distant point as if perceiving beyond the visible reality. In that moment of calm, his faith was his only companion. When he returned to his room, his condition rapidly declined. His skin paled, a sign of irreversible decline. In a final breath, he once more whispered the names of Jesus and Mary, his lips trembling in a last prayer. His brothers gathered around him, prayed in soft voices, their chant blending the spiritual and the emotion of the moment. On September 23, 1968, at 2:30 in the morning, Padre Pio left this world. His departure was marked by the peace that had defined his entire existence. That same day, 5 years prior, he had received the stigmata, symbolizing his deep devotion. And on this day of his passing, he left behind a legacy of love and faith that would continue to inspire thousands of believers. If this story moves you, don't forget to support our channel by subscribing and hitting the like button. We hope to share more incredible stories that celebrate life, faith, and the mysteries around us. Padre Pio, even after his departure, continues to touch souls, reminding us all that faith can transcend time and space.